welcome. I know we did just get connected for a minute. I don't know why, but it seems to be up and running. It did not disconnect on my end. We'll see what happens. Welcome to Shop Talk with Dakkar tonight, out by the fire. I'm so glad that I was able to light a fire to keep warm. If you're not on the East Coast, it's been about 90 degrees this week, and that carried on today. And I've been outside in the 18th century all day today, so a little toasty, but that's okay. We've got some cool stuff to do by the fire tonight. I'm gonna keep watching the chat on there. It looks like we're good and online now. Cool. So I do have a nice fire going. Oh, yeah. Nice warm fire. And I have a whole bunch of stuff that I can do with that fire. So let's do it. First of all, we would have to start it. Now, I'll call this cheating. I needed a nice hot fire already rolling in order to do one of these activities. I didn't have time in the show to wait for it, so I've got it already started, some nice coals going. But if we were to need to start a fire in the 18th century, best way to start a fire is not to let it go out. Fire is so crucial to life. It's a tool. It is keeping you warm. It's keeping you fed. That you generally try to keep one going all the time, wherever you might be living. But if you do need to start it from scratch, I've got a couple of different ways to do that. Let's see. It's been cool in the Pacific Northwest, rain all week. I would take a little bit of rain, and actually, we might get a shower tonight, which could change our plans. We're going to be very careful, because one of the things we're doing is working with molten metal, and we'll talk about why moisture and molten metal, they don't get along at all. We'll talk about that in a minute. But if we need to start a fire, this is what I carry. This is my tinder kit, my fire starting kit. This type of a kit might be a little earlier than 17th, 18th century, but humans have been carrying something around like this since we figured this stuff out. And I have a variety of ways to start fire in this kit, because you never know what the conditions are going to be. It's all about sustainability in the end. It's all about being able to start a fire in any condition, but also not having to use something like matches, if you had them, or Bic lighters. They're great today. We use them all the time, but they're not sustainable. You're going to run out of matches. I can't make matches. Maybe you can make matches. That's a lie. I've made matches once. It didn't go well. I certainly can't make a Bic lighter. So anything that will start a fire repetitively, without needing new materials is awesome sauce. And one of those things that is sometimes out is the sun. This is a burning glass. Oh, I can do cool stuff with the camera. This is a burning glass. It's just a big magnifying glass. And these were really common around in the 18th century. Let's see what happens if I go this way. Do I get smaller? Nope. And if you've ever sat in your backyard as a kid and lit ants on fire, don't do that, it's cruel. Unless you're going to eat them, barbecue them. You know that you can start a fire fairly easily on a bright sunny day by focusing the light from the sun through a burning glass. That is not going to help us tonight because it is overcast, but I do carry that. Also good for looking at things, small things. The main method is going to be the same thing that we use on our flintlock weapons, and that is just a simple flint and steel. We talked a little bit about how sparks work. It's cooler than it sounds when we refit my boat gun, which will fire a little bit here. But essentially what we're doing is using a very hard piece of stone, chert. This is flint. It is metamorphosized chalk. So you find it in chalk deposits. You can find some over here in North America. The good stuff comes from England and France, though. The stuff you find over here tends to be a slightly larger grain structure, although this will work. This is just a piece from my driveway. And if I hit this piece of hardened steel on this stone, the stone is actually hard enough and sharp enough to scrape off some pieces of that steel and ignite them on fire with the friction. And they're going to burn at these are light yellow to orange. They're going to be burning at about 1700 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's plenty to get an ember going. And it's just a simple method. Put that on there. And the first people to figure this out were using iron pyrite, or iron pyrites if you're English. It's a stone made mostly of iron, and if you hit it with another stone, you can create a spark. And then people figured out how to smelt iron, make steel, and get some good flint, and get some good sparks out of that, just like that. Okay? Now you notice the color of those sparks, they're not like a white hot. They're not really good for just putting into a bundle of tinder and getting a fire going. You need an intermediary tool. I'm just gonna, don't mind me, I'm just gonna pull my lead off a fire. Things you say every day. Let's just set this down here without setting the lawn on fire with Terminator there. Okay. We'll heat that back up in a minute. I don't want it to get too warm and start to off-gas. Breathing lead is not great for you. So we need an intermediary, and that intermediary is something called Char Cloth. And it is essentially charcoal. Think of like a piece of hardwood charcoal or a charcoal briquette. It's had most of its components burned out, and what you're left with is carbon. This is canvas that's been burned in a low oxygen environment in this tin right here. So it's sustainable. As long as I have some scrap fabric, I can make more char cloth right in the field as long as I get that first fire going. And this will catch and hold an ember very, very easily. It's incredibly flammable, but it doesn't burst into flame. I'll show you. It catches and holds a spark really well. So if we take our Flint and Steel, let's see what we've got here on the chat. Squirrel nests. Yeah, squirrel nests are great. Mouse nests. And no, I don't think the Pacific Northwest is probably not the best place for trying a burning glass, but if you get the right day, it'll work. So the way I like to do this is to hold my char cloth under my flint. Some people like on top of the flint. You do whatever you think is right. It's really just a trial and error thing. You find a nice sharp edge on your flint. Hold the char cloth. Pardon me, a little smoky here. Hold the char cloth so that it will catch that spark and strike it. And with any luck, and not too much time. Sometimes it's on the first strike, sometimes you sit there for an hour and do it. Just try to get, there we go. Got a nice spark to land on our char cloth. And we get that little cherry ember. Can you focus on that? You can see what's going on there. And it's going to burn nice and slow, nice and hot. And then I'm going to have my tinder bundle ready to go, which today I have one of my favorites. Come off of there. Which is tow. This is raw flax fiber, which is what you use to make linen fabric. But any fluffy nest of material will work, or literally a nest is recommended. We take our burning piece of char cloth, we stick it in there, and we add some oxygen to it. So we've got our heat, we've got our fuel, we need our oxygen. This method of pulling it away from your face keeps the smoke out of your lungs. There we've got our tinder bundle burning nicely. We put this underneath a bunch of small sticks, maybe some pine needles. There you can see it's burning. Not on my camera cord, thank you. Technology and 18th century, modern technology and 18th century technology sometimes conflict. Almost burned my camera cord in half. But there, we made fire. It's that easy. Make sure that's not going to burn anything important. Yay, we made fire. And when it goes, it goes. And that's it. Fire. Yeah, oh, cool. Fire emojis. Hello, cat. Fire. Let there be fire. There is fire. Lights, tinder, beard, and camera on fire. I did not light my beard on fire. I'm perfectly fine. And notice I tied my hair back. Safety in the top 10 anyway. But yeah, when it goes, it goes. And then you can get that into your properly prepared fire pit. I definitely singed my camera cord, but you can still see me, so we're good. It's always always exciting at the campfire. So that's how we make fire. And once you've done it a couple of times, it's really not that tricky. If your stuff gets wet, it can make your life a little bit difficult. But in general, it's pretty easy. And then you just make sure you collect tinder as you see it. Birch bark is great. You can make fine little birch bark shavings. I tend to carry some of this stuff. This is fat wood. It smells great. This comes from the shoulder of a pine tree. So you find a down pine tree in the woods, something that's fallen down and started to rot. And what you'll see, if you've ever walked through the woods, you'll see the branches coming up out of a fallen down pine tree. And you can grab hold of them and just pull them out. And there'll be a big clump on the end. That's the fat wood. That's where the pine pitch settles as the tree grows. It gathers in that shoulder. They make great torches. You can just light it and use it as a torch, or you can cut it up and make yourself some fat wood sticks to carry. And just take your knife, scrape these off, make a little pile of dust, and it's just full of pine pitch, and it will take one of those sparks really well, or get your fire going when you're having trouble with it. This is really cool stuff to have around. So if you're walking through the woods, you have a chance to gather some fat wood, I recommend it. All right. Cool. I wanted to, because we're outside tonight, ooh, sunshine. We might not get rained on after all. Cool. Because we're outside tonight, I wanted to carry on with some of the stuff we talked about with muskets when we were refinishing one of my guns, and go through the whole process of what I would need to do to make that ready to use. And this is the first step, believe it or not, starting a fire, so that I can then make my ammunition for that. Again, all about sustainability, being able to carry on with what you're doing in the field and carrying the raw materials with you that you need. One of the raw materials that, that soldiers would have been issued and that everyone had pretty ready access to is lead. It's a very useful metal. It is neurotoxic to humans, so you don't want to lick it, eat it, chew on it. Not that I didn't chew on lead sinkers as a kid. It's kind of sweet. Just don't do it. It's not a good idea. But lead is great because it can be easily molded and manipulated. Lead sheeting can be used for waterproofing holes in boats, can be used as a patching material, and it can be used to cast things or turn the metal molten and pour it into a shaping mold in the field, because all you need is a campfire. You don't need the high heat that you would need for casting even bronze or brass or iron. That really needs to be done in a foundry, somewhere there they can have a furnace that gets to a very, very high temperature. Lead, I should have looked up the actual melting temperature of lead. It varies depending on what other things might have been added to it, but it's pretty low. It's like campfire temperature. It's not that hot. So when we want to make a musket ball, we just need some lead and a mold, and we can make something like this. This is a lead musket ball. This is probably about a 59-ish caliber, meaning 0.59 of an inch. This one's a little bit bigger. These are some original 18th century musket balls, so they've got a little bit of patina to them. And also, we have some buckshot. So this is a fairly large piece of shot, and the standard military load, if you want to ruin somebody's day, is called buck and ball. And it is a cartridge consisting of one round ball like this and 3 or 4 of these small buckshot, and they would be stacked inside the cartridge like that. So you have sort of a dual purpose cartridge. You have something, hopefully you're going to hit them with this. If you don't, you miss, you'll probably hit them with one of these. So it's a cross between a slug round, standard solid shot, and a shotgun. Those are going to spread out. Those small ones are going to spread out around the larger one. It's not nice, but hey, we're not trying to be nice. The other type of shot that can be fired out of usually cannons is something like this. This is essentially a small cannonball. This is Grape Shot. You would have a whole cluster of Grape Shot inside of a canister or inside of a fabric wrapper to fire out of a cannon or a small cannon, maybe one of these, large cannon, big container full of them. These are made out of iron. These are cast in a foundry, so you heat up the iron very, very hot, pour it into a mold, and you get these guys. And so I can't make these out in the field. You need a proper facility to do that. So difference between cast iron and casting lead. These are also original. Imagine that flying through the air at you. And that tool that I keep mentioning is a mold. This is a ball mold. This is a 75 caliber. I use this one for demonstrating for a very particular reason. It doesn't fit any of the guns I own. My wife has one, so I'm in trouble if she gets a hold of this and has a grudge against me that day. And that's for safety. If I'm doing a demonstration and I'm making musket balls, I do not want them to be able to fit in my gun. This is too big to go down the bore of any of my guns. But it is basically a Play-Doh mold. It opens up, has a cavity on the inside, has a hole in the top through which you pour the lead, little handle, which you can add wooden handles to. I don't, because it makes it a pain in the neck to carry around. I'll just use a pair of leather gloves tonight. You pour the molten metal into the hole in the top. It creates a ball. If all goes well, pop it out. You have a little sprue, a little horn on the top to cut off, and that's what these little nippers here, these are our Sprue Trimmers, built right in. And every couple of soldiers probably would have one of these, maybe every mess, every group of soldiers or sailors that eat together, something like this, so that you can make your own musket balls in the field. The smaller stuff you can do with a mold. This is a buckshot mold. Makes one. You can imagine that gets a little tedious after a while. There is another method that you can't do in the field, you need a facility to do, which is a shot tower. I'll put a picture of a shot tower up in the Discord after the show. And it's a really cool process. You build a big tall tower, many stories tall, usually out of stone, brick, and you put a basin of water, pool of water in the bottom. You go to the top, you melt your lead, and you pour it down the tower, and it rains molten lead. And as that lead falls, it turns into little droplets. Fairly surprisingly uniform droplets, and how far you drop it makes different sizes of shot. When it hits the water, it cools and solidifies. You want to be nowhere near there because that water is going to be boiling and popping and spitting. But that's a way of making a whole bunch of shot, from little tiny bird shot up to something probably this size, a little double-aught buckshot. There was a large shot tower on Manhattan for the longest time. I'll put a picture of that one up. They're really cool. You can still find them around out in the wild. So that would be a way of making lead shot in large quantities, because if you're going hunting for birds or something, you need a couple hundred pieces of shot per cartridge. So you don't want to be pouring them like this. Take forever. Let me check in with the chat. Kitty has an iron steel cannonball floating around somewhere. Very large ball bearing. Yeah, so if it's a ball bearing, it's going to be made of steel. If it's modern. Don't fire that out of your cannon. Probably. You can wrap it, you can wad it, but that steel is going to be really hard on your cannon bore. They would have been made of just cast iron. So steel has other things added to it, generally lots of carbon added to it to give it strength and other properties. Yeah, but cannonballs are really cool, from the smallest little grape shot up through like 36 pounders. They get pretty big and hefty. Something interesting happens with the geometry of a sphere. They don't really get super large, but they get really heavy. As you add mass to a sphere, a 9-pound cannonball will fit in your hand like a large grapefruit. 12-pounder, still fit in your hand like a slightly larger grapefruit, but it's a lot more mass. It doesn't take much extra diameter to add a whole lot of mass to a cannonball, and that's what cannons are all about, sending kinetic energy downrange, sending mass downrange. They don't explode, they're solid. They did have exploding shells in the 18th century, really dodgy, often didn't work, often more dangerous to the people trying to fire them than the people downrange. So yeah, I'd stay away from those. Let's see, too big for anything you have to fire it from. Good, yes. Could melt lead in an oven. Yes, don't. Breathing lead fumes is really bad for you, it turns out. But yeah, you could. You only need, in the high hundreds of degrees to melt lead. 36 SAA and a 45 single shot. Well, you're well armed. We'll keep on your good side. I tend to stick to the cannons. It's just easier. So with that said, let's make some musket balls. And there's one more tool that I need. 2 more. I need my glove so I don't scald my hand. And this has solidified now, so it's a little safer. I need a ladle. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a cast iron ladle that will hold my lead. I've already melted this down. You can see a pool in there, but it's solidified again, so I'm going to get that back onto our fire and warm it back up. Let's put it right there. Doing this without spilling it into the fire is always the trick. All right, so we'll let that come back up. It's still warm, so it shouldn't take too long to melt back down. I'll show you what that looks like. There we are. Ladle on the fire. Do this without dumping my camera into the fire. Would be nice. There she is. And eventually, that will melt like a Terminator or a changeling. My sci-fi nerdy friends. So we'll give that a minute. When that warms up, we'll pour a little bit of that molten lead into our mold and see if we can make a musket ball. Yay! Yes, we can see. Yep. We'll be. Oh, what is? Oh, we saw the melting point. 327.5 Celsius. Do I look European? Wait, don't answer that. What's that in Fahrenheit? Somebody Google convert that to Fahrenheit. Or Kelvin. I don't care. I'll use any of them. Yes, the camera is mobile, which is going to be important because we're going to make some musket cartridges as well later. I don't do that sitting next to the fire, nor smoking a cigar. I have seen people do both. No. Respect this stuff. It can hurt you. It can bite you. Walked into a large tent one evening. There's a couple of old-timers sitting around a table with candle lanterns, smoking cigars, and making cannon charges. Powder all over the place. I think they're all still around. Didn't hear a boom. We have an answer. 621.5 Fahrenheit. Woohoo! Okay, so we're looking... yeah, my oven cannot quite get to 625. I can get to the 550-ish range. I wish it got hotter for making pizza. I really want one of those outdoor propane-fired pizza ovens. They're so awesome. Yeah, I can't quite get that hot in the oven, so we're gonna use our campfire. Plus, not breathing lead fumes. Bonus. All right, warming this stuff up. When it goes quick. We'll get it up to the temperature, and as soon as it needs like that extra half of a degree, and it just melts. Becomes liquid all at once. It's cool. We are using lead tonight because it melts a little bit easier. I'll often use, when I'm doing demonstrations, especially with kids, and I want to pass that musket ball around after it's cooled down a little bit, I'll use pewter, which is tin, antimony, some copper sometimes, essentially stuff that's not neurotoxic, but it requires a bit of a higher melting point, and I wasn't so sure about that on the fire. It's only been going for a half hour or so. This is the exciting part. Watching metal melt. It's like watching paint dry, but more painful. I'll talk about the water thing. If it should come on to rain, I'm going to quickly get something over the top of that, which I have ready and standing by, yeah. It's starting to melt. Okay, I'll talk quick. So if moisture hits, like rain, hits a pool of molten metal, it instantly evaporates and does so violently and explosively. And all of that expanding steam that's going to come rushing out of there, because the water is going to expand in volume very, very rapidly. It's going to take that molten metal with it, which is very bad for soft, squishy, non-fireproof humans standing nearby, me. So I don't want moisture. Pro tip, sweat is water. So if it's a really hot day, you're working over your molten metal, remember that. Yeah, ask me how I know. I'm also going to toss on some safety glasses when we go to pour this. Grab those. Put them here somewhere. Here they are. I had to relocate my chair because the smoke was coming in on my face. Okay, I see shiny. When that metal turns shiny, it's melting. I am going to wear some safety glasses just because we don't want this. Let me rephrase that. We want this to go viral on YouTube, but not for that reason. Chat check. Not interrupting. Not at all. Campfire 1,000 to 2,000. Yeah, 2,000 is a really hot campfire. And I have to put some extra air underneath. 2,000 degrees is about the temperature you need iron to forge it, to work with it. So that's a bright straw yellow on your iron. So your forging fire needs to be hotter than that, obviously, in the 3,500 range or hotter. Doing that with wood would be a trick. You'd probably want to have some type of a cover over the top of it and adding extra oxygen to the bottom. But it is doable. Shiny, yes, we are getting shiny. I'll bring you in and show you that in just a second. New eye patch, yes, I want no eye patches. 0. Number of eye patches I want, 0. I don't fool around with my eyes. Really try to be careful with that. I wear safety glasses shooting cannons now. That's a story for another day. There's usually a story behind new safety gear. And I just get, these are not as cool looking. They've got the black frames. They make totally transparent safety glasses that, look, if you're that close to my cannon that you can see I'm wearing safety glasses, you got a problem anyway. All right, let me take in. Let's look at our Terminator / Changeling. Those are my trees. There we go. Without getting so hot that we start to melt the camera, you can see it starting to pool on that far side around the edges where it's hotter. That is our lead starting to melt. Don't mind the anachronous technology sitting on the table. Sorry. Gonna have the streaming gear. Can you see me? Hey, you can see. Hi. This is informal shop talk tonight. Sitting by the campfire, we have to be informal. If there's a rule, there's always a story. Yeah, if there's a safety poster, there's a story. And possibly one less employee. Yeah, if you're that close, you look the other way if you're that close to a cannon. That's a good idea. The thing about cannons is that the dragon's tongue of fire comes out both ends. There's 2 holes. There's the muzzle, hopefully pointing down at the enemy, and there's the hole that you light it with. And the first time when I teach people to shoot cannons, I like to do so at night, at least show them a firing at night, so that they get an idea of how much fire actually comes out of that touch hole at the back or the vent hole. It's a lot. It's like a 3-4 foot tongue of flame that comes out the back, and if your face is in front of that, you're going to have a bad day. I've had bad days. It's really interesting to go to the doctor and say, I got hit in the face with a cannon blast. They go, what? Are you alive? Yeah. This is pewter. That's that pewter I was talking about. This is a lead-free pewter. Back in the day, pewter had a lot of lead in it. It was the poor man's silver. If you couldn't afford silver to drink out of or eat off of, you would have pewter, which is lead, again, some bunch of tin in it to make it a little harder. Turns out that's not good for you in the long term. So now we use lead-free pewter. This is the Britannia mix, which I've got the composition of somewhere. I have a bit of a problem buying too much of this stuff because it's just really, really cool. Someday I'll show off a picture of my collection. Pre-musket balls. Yes, we have baby musket ball soup. It's not witchcraft, although I'll take the compliment. All right, we're getting close here, I think. Look, I'm going to move my camera wire behind that piece of firewood. Planning ahead. All right. One glove. Oh yeah. We've got some molten lead in there. Let's give that a stirry whir. Just poke some of that. Oh yeah, that's still solid there. Okay, give it another couple minutes. It's almost there. Just let those last chunks melt. Put some embers over by it. You gotta do this carefully I'm moving the embers around to get a little more heat near my ladle, but I don't want to get any of those embers into the lead because it will contaminate it. Usually it floats to the top and you can sort of pour from the bottom, but I don't want weird bits in my musket balls. I want pure, solid lead balls. There is a trick shot that one couldn't... I've been in crews where you weren't officially a member until you'd at least been peppered. Yes, safety rules are tougher because of it. Good idea, Captain. As are mine. Yeah, show you how long I've been doing this hobby. My nickname for quite a while was Pepperface Kid. I still have tattooing. Turns out, when black powder burns, it turns into mostly carbon. Carbon makes awesome tattoos. Still have some on the inside of my, or the outside, but inside my eyelids that could not be dug out by the metal tools that the doctor and I were using to dig out the tattoos. It was completely covered with speckles. Yes, yes, PFK. Kitty has had professional firearms training, and a good deal of things that you see people doing make you cringe. Yes, I also have been a modern firearms range officer at various times, just kind of like this, not like officially licensed kind of dude, but the person with the experience. So you put them in charge of the newbies, and it is scary. Yeah, there's often a lot of, look, I hit it! Isn't that cool? Yeah, that's very, very cool. Okay. We're melting. Slowly. Oh, yeah. Get some nice liquid metal. Ooh, that's warm. That's hot. So we'll make a couple of musket balls, and then we'll make some musket cartridges, and then we'll make some stuff go boom. Not with the musket ball in it, because I have neighbors within 5 miles. Oh yeah, getting real close. This is like hiking with somebody. It's like, yeah, it's just over that next ridge. Really, really close. It's right there. 6 hours later. Put my fire starting kit away. I'm quite sure we're done with that. We have a fire. If you want to make your own char cloth, it's really easy. Get yourself an Altoids tin. Although the new ones have that embossing. You can just buy the tins on Amazon blank. Some instructions will tell you to drill a hole in the side or punch a hole and put a plug, like a wooden plug, in it. I find that the Altoids tins have just enough airflow to let the combusting gases out, but not let a lot of oxygen in. So I just use it as is. You take your fabric, cut into little squares to fit, put it in the tin. I like using heavy canvas, like a 14-ounce duck canvas. Make sure it is completely cotton, no synthetics, no synthetic blends. But you can buy it at Joann Fabrics, or not a sponsor, any of your other fabric stores, or just scavenge it. You know, old stuff is great, scrap stuff is great. Just give it a lighter test. You know, hold it to a flame, make sure it doesn't melt. Put those squares, you know, fill it right up. You want it fairly packed. You don't want it super tight. You want a little bit of loft in there, but fill the tin right up, put it on your campfire, sort of on the edge, and you'll start to see wisps of burning gases coming out the side. And when that stops, pull it and leave it, right? So when you see the gases stop, all of the organic material has burned, all the non-carbon stuff has burned off. Pull it out and just let it sit and continue to bake. After a few minutes, pull it out, check it, pull them apart, make sure they're all black. If there's any white still, stick it back in for a while, and then you'll have char cloth. Easy as making char cloth. Kitty says, I had a job at a federal PD, Federal Police Department, working for the Army. They got a new person out at the range, and that person started waving around a fully loaded Beretta, probably a nice little 9mm. I like those. It's not a 40 or 45, but I like them. Well, asking if they were using real bullets. Oh my. Yes, notice the end of the barrel is not orange. This is not your Miles weapon. Miles is the Army. I don't know if they still use it. Maybe, Kitty, you know. Miles was the Army's laser tag system. It's really cool, but not real bullets, blanks. Am I using real bullets? That's a good one. Okay, I'm going to need to grab that with my right hand. I'm going to point you at the ground because we're going to do this over the ground. Hey, look, I put shoes on today, just for you. Well, actually, so I don't pour molten lead on my feet. I don't generally wear shoes terribly often. They're expensive. The bottoms wear out. All right, let's give this a go. I think that new fella Darwin has a theory about that. Yes, the finches that wave around loaded rifles don't procreate. Okay. I don't think I need I do need this glove. You got to plan these things out. Order of operations, very important. Okay. Because this stuff will cool rather rapidly. Here's our molten lead. It's all shiny. Look at that. It's so pretty. Looks like quicksilver. Quicksilver is mercury. And if you're interested in a television show that shows you the applications of mercury, reference back to Sunset Ramen. Okay. Oh, that's getting warm. Let's do this quick. We're going to take our mold, pour in our lead. Boink! Nice thing about lead is all those scraps, I'm just going to pick them up off the ground and reuse them. Melt it right down. I'll tell you a cool archaeology story when I finish this. And now that is set. I was a little sloppy. Camera, there we go. I was a little sloppy, a little over pour, but again, that's okay. We're just going to reuse that. Pop that open. There's our musket ball inside. Check that out. Now this solidifies quite quickly, but it will retain a whole lot of heat for quite a while. So I'm going to keep it in my gloved hand and let it cool down. But there is our musket ball, which is okay. We got a little bit of air gap in the bottom, not too bad. And a lot of sprue. All that extra is sprue. That's what we'll cut off and just toss back in our pot. There's our, hey, there's a thumbnail right there. There's our newly cast musket ball. I'm going to set that on my conveniently stone table and set my lead. It's still nice and juicy. Let's get it. Let's do another one. I'll check the chat in a minute. I only have so many hands. Let's make one more. See if I can be a little neater. Whoa, that felt not good. That felt like I had an air bubble that didn't want to come out the top. You can kind of tell when it's not a full pour, but if I open this and it's full, I'll be happy. Nope, air gap. We only got half a musket ball. Half of a sad musket ball. Put that right there. Let's try it again. This is also because it's cooling down a little bit. Well, it might have been okay. Oh, look how neat that is. Oh, if that's a good one, I'm going to be happy. The mold is sucking that heat out, or the heat is transferring to the mold very quickly, so it doesn't take long. Oh no, another half. That'd make like a cool decoration. It's like a little space station or something. Got another little air bubble in that one. Let's try one more. I think I need to put this back on the fire, though. That's my guess. Yeah, we're only getting halves, so we'll heat that back up for a minute. But the first one was awesome. Okay. Warm that back up. Stick some of our bits and pieces back in. Those are still going to be warm, so I'll leave those on the ground for the moment. And I'll check if we have any questions. Glad to see I'm doing cool things. No, I'm doing hot things. Get it? Okay. Tiny bar shot. Yes, you could. I have a couple of them. That would be cute. I'll make some tiny bar shot, maybe. I like that. Bar shot, if you're wondering, is possibly 2 full cannonballs, or sometimes half of cannonballs. Not cut in half, but cast in half, connected by a rod. And those will be loaded down into the cannon. When it comes out, it starts to spin. It's used for ripping down sails and rigging. I've never seen one fired live, but I hear tell that they make a horrendously vicious whirring sound as they spin through the air as a disc of death. Trademark. I'm in my natural habitat by the campfire doing stuffs. Yep, that is very true. Do like it, I think it's a human thing. It feels like evening when you get the fire going. You cook your food, stay warm. It's homey. Feels good. We've been doing it for like a long time. I was going to throw out a number, but I'm not exactly sure when fire was started. I'm going to say around 500,000? Don't quote me. Check your sources. See if we can get that melted again. If not, the fire is dying down. That's okay. We made one. We'll move on to, actually, we should move right on now to making some musket cartridges. We'll leave that there. If it melts down, we want to make another one. Cool. So we're going to transfer over to a space away from the fire. I'm going to turn my tablet around so that I can at least have a monitor of some kind. This is true field recording. In a literal field. Okay. Okay. There we go. All right. Tell us a story as the sun goes down. Yes, I will tell you that archaeology story after archaeology story about lead scraps. Actually, just show you my hands. Okay. This is gunpowder. Pardon the modern container, but keeping gunpowder in its original container is good because it is specifically designed to hold it. I prefer the old tins, but now they're putting them in plastic because they've been able to design a plastic that doesn't produce static. Sparks, static, bad with gunpowder. This is 3F, if you're new to gunpowder. It is graded by the size of the granule. Well, this is a new one. It smells good. So 3F, the more Fs, the more Fs you give, the smaller the granules. So this is 3F. It's about like table salt. 2F is larger. That's about like kosher salt, and that's what you would use often in cannons. There's more gunpowder per volume the higher the the more Fs there are, right? You can go all the way up to 5F. That's for priming. So it's denser. There's more powder in a particular space. I like 3 for musket cartridges. You can get by with 2, but you get a slightly bigger bang when you do 3F because you have, again, more powder in the volume. So to make a musket cartridge the traditional way, we're going to start with paper. Any kind of like a craft paper will do. If you can get your hands on that stuff that Amazon sends sometimes that's like a brown craft paper with a little wax to it, super good. This is not that, but it'll work for tonight. We're going to first cut a shape, and I'm just going to do this freehand because I've done it once or twice in my life. We want a rectangle-y shape with a triangle on the end of it. That's a bit on the big side. Let's cut that down a touch. Okay. That's a halfway decent blank for a musket cartridge. Should look like that. We're going to put the point in our top right corner. We're going to need some tools. This is my gun tool kit, which you've probably seen before. And in here are a couple of different types of forms. This should be matched to the size of your gun. There's a 50 caliber. This was an extra one that I made when I made Kat's cartridge box. Made her a few musket rounds for her Queen Anne 50 cal pistol. So that's a little small for this. This one is sized for my boat gun. And this is a dual-purpose tool. It's a piece of pipe with a stopper in the end. This is a powder measure for probably about 100 grains, 100 little specks of powder, which is a good load for firing blanks. If you're firing ball, if you're firing live, you want to have less powder because you're creating more pressure. Good rule of thumb is to just about match the caliber of the weapon. So if you have a 75 caliber gun, 75 grains of 2F, 3F is around about. Go by your manufacturer's instructions, but that's a pretty good load. For blanks, we'll often use a bit more because there's no compression. There's no, the gas is not being contained, it's just going poof, and so you need a little bit more to get a bigger bang and a little bigger flash. So I'm going to use this to make the shape. I'm making a tube. This is still a little bit on the long side. Cut some of this off. I'm just making that a little bit taller and less wide. And I'm going to put my mold down there. I'm leaving about a little over half, 3/4 of an inch or so on the tall pointy side. And I'm just going to roll it like an illicit substance container. When I get to that, I got my point going in that direction. I'm going to twist in the direction of that point. This is where having that waxed paper is great because it won't tear as easily. This stuff you have to be just a touch gentle with it. And you're just going to make yourself a little twisted end and then give that a thwomp. The plug, the wooden plug that's in here is divoted a touch so that that tail has somewhere to go. And now we've made a darn near airtight. It's a little difficult to get off sometimes. Hear the pop? The pop is good. That means you made an airtight cylinder, which is also powder tight. And that's what you make. You make a little tube like that. Sit down some night at the kitchen table, make up a couple thousand of those, you'll be good for a year or two. Now I'm going to measure my powder in. I could use this, but since I have one, I'm going to use this fancy brass adjustable powder measure, patterned after an original. And this has a graduated adjustment in the bottom from, it looks like, 50 grains all the way up to 120. So I'm going to set this at 100, tighten the set screw, and now that cylinder is the amount of black powder that I want. I'm going to take my gunpowder. A funnel is a really handy thing to have, but since I'm outside, I'm just going to kind of let fly. Try not to waste too much. It's expensive these days. It's really cool if you do this inside and then you run your vacuum cleaner, you get all kinds of sparks and pops. Don't do that. So we've got our full powder measure. We're going to invert our blank over the top of that. I'm going to check the chat because I see activities.
Funnel flask, yeah, like a metal funnel flask is great. Just make sure if it's steel that you're using it only with brass implements so you don't get any sparking. Plastic can create static, so be careful with that. If you can get yourself a brass funnel, Yahtzee. Since it's darker, when you sprinkle it on your food, you can see how much you have, unlike regular salt. Oh, yes, and it makes you extremely regular, too. Potassium nitrate, one of the components of gunpowder, is a wonderful laxative. Boink. Dump that in there. Now it's full up to only about there, which is what we want, because we're going to fold, just making little 45s, down, down, down. Now, if you do want to get super fancy, and you're not just doing blank charges, this is the point where, of course, you would have your musket ball in here as well. A little bit of glue. You would use a hide glue or a hoof glue made from animals to seal that up. Don't ever use staples, please. Modern reenactors sometimes try to get away with that, but then you can end up with a piece of metal being fired downrange. I don't like that, being the person downrange. That's a completed musket round. It is relatively airtight. It's not going to leak out of there for the most part. It's not waterproof, but we're going to solve that by putting it into our cartridge box. This is my shoulder cartridge box. Military style, hangs over your right shoulder. And inside here is that block, a wooden block, to keep all of these separate. Hopefully with the idea that if one should accidentally detonate, they may not all accidentally detonate at the same time. Put that right in there. Boom. Easy, right? So you just need, a couple hundred of those and you get yourself a battle. Sparks when vacuuming. Evil thoughts. Yeah. It's special on cleaning day, if you forget. All right, let's make one. We'll probably go just a little bit past 8 o'clock tonight. We'll finish up with some musket firing as the sun's going down. Let's make one more of those, just so if you're following along at home, you can see what we're doing. Put that across there. Cut that down there. Put a point onto it. Well, I'm seeing a bit of a spinning circle. Sorry if I'm dropping anybody. We are still streaming. If you're still with me, awesome. You got to come back in. I'll still be here. There is my cartridge blank. Wrong side. There's that side. Point in the top right corner. Leave yourself a good 1/2 or 3/4 of an inch. Roll that cartridge. Twist that cartridge. Thwump the cartridge. Pull out the form. Grab your boom sauce. Pour that into there. Close your container. Always good to close up your powder container, if nothing else but to keep moisture out. Fill the cartridge. Fold the cartridge. I'm doing this one. You can do it from the bottom or the top. Doesn't make much difference. And there you go. Finished cartridge into the block. Let's see. Chat. With proper tools and a guide and such, how many rounds do you think you could make per 10 minutes of work? 10. Maybe 15. Yeah. You don't want to rush too much because you'll get powder spilled all over, and there's no reason. You're making these ahead. The whole point of this is that you are having these ready to go before you need them, not after. Okay. Securing this powder can, I'm just going to make sure it's well out of our way. Let's figure out what our range is going to be here. I'm going to walk away from the chat for just a second. Don my cartridge box. I probably should have sent a text to the neighbors. Oh well. Let's see where that puts me. Yeah, look at that. Cool. So this is the same boat gun that we refinished on another show. This is a carbine made specifically for naval use. Shorter, easier to work within a boat, within the confines of a boat. Flintlock. Simple operation. Got a piece of that flint that we used to start a fire earlier, a hard piece of steel on the frizzen, a pan. This is where my priming powder is going to go. Close the frizzen over the top, put the rest of the powder into the bore, into the breech, the back of the barrel. Whatever you're firing goes on top of that. Pull the hammer back to full cock, and when you pull the trigger, you should get sparks. Like that. And hopefully that's going to set off that priming powder. It's going to go through a hole in the side of the barrel, ignite the powder that's at the back of the barrel. Out goes your musket ball. So, you retrieve one of those brandy new cartridges we just made from our box. Open it up. One of the requirements to be in the Army in the 18th century is that you have no less than 2 teeth and they must be opposing. Harder to find than you might think. So you can tear off the end of the paper cartridge. Your musket ball would be down here in the bottom. I'm going to pour in a little bit of the powder into the priming pan, tipping it a little bit so that I get some into that vent hole. Close my pan. Rest of the powder gets poured down the barrel, like meow. At this point, I would have the musket ball in my hand in this paper. I would draw my ramrod and ram the paper and the musket ball down to create a nice tight seal around the ball. It's called wadding. I'm not going to do that tonight. I don't really want to kill anything. I just want to make a boom. Now when I pull this hammer back to full cock, it'll be ready to fire. Let's see if it goes off. I haven't fired this gun in 2.5 years, but I gave it an overhaul, so we should be okay. You can see me. Yay. Just like that. Let's do it again. Hammer back to half cock, retrieve cartridge, open cartridge, prime pan, close pan, powder goes down the barrel, all nice like that. Empty cartridge goes into the fire, full cock, take aim, clear range, and fire. Just like that. Let me back up a little bit and see if you can see the fire. Where am I? There I is. Okay. See if I can do this so you can see a nice jet of flame. Oh, I see a chipmunk. Hurry, load. Chipmunks have been eating all my garden seeds again. I've been seeing to them with my slingshot. Hammer back, take aim, and fire. Oh, clack. Oh, I've got all the dogs in the neighborhood barking now. That's enough of that. We don't have any close neighbors, but everybody in town heard that. All right. Bring you back over Fireside here. I'm going to remove the cartridge box before I sit too close to the fire. There we are. Definitely a steamy day today. Getting a little nicer out though. So that story I was going to tell is a pretty cool one. I think anyway. In town, I'm not really, I mean, technically we're in town, but we're kind of outside. And you know what? It's upstate New York. Gunshots are not a new thing. Yeah, I'm serious about the chipmunks. They burrow underground and eat my seeds from underground. Just backing up the chat. Booms! Yes, we got booms! Your neighbors set up their own firing range and forgot to tell anybody. That's just rude. there's a big so black powder does not explode, so it doesn't create a sonic shock wave like a modern rifle round is actually sending the bullet supersonic, creating a shock, you know what I mean, sonic boom. This is more of like a whoop, so it's not nearly as hard to listen to as modern weapons. So the thing about lead, I now have lead scrap all over by my campfire. And archaeologists find lead all the time. It's really easy to find. It's highly sensitive to metal detectors, or metal detectors are highly sensitive to it. So you find it at campsites, and it stays. It lasts in the ground really well. And it was always kind of thought, well, if you find a lot of lead scrap, this stuff, around a campfire at a dig, around a camp, that must have been a place where they were having a lot of battles. There must have been a lot of action there. And then people thought about it a little more and looked at the sites in context and went, no, really, the places that we find a lot of lead scrap, they didn't seem to have a lot of action. They were making musket balls, they were making other stuff out of lead, but the places that had big battles, that they knew they were going into a heavy battle the next day, or it was a multi-day engagement, I don't find any lead scrap. Why is it? That's because people were going around their campfire and going, holy yes, I need more lead balls, picking up every piece of scrap, finding anything made of lead or pewter, melting it down and making as much ammunition as they possibly could. The value, the intrinsic value of that lead skyrockets when you have more conflict, when you have bigger battles going on. So it's just an interesting change in thought of something you assume, if there's a lot of scattered lead scrap, there must have been a heavy engagement there. It actually turns out it's probably the other way around. People are scrounging around their campfire to find every little bit they can because they know they're going to need it. A little depressing, but interesting little piece of archaeological thinking. So cool. I'm going to pick up all this lead. We're going to remelt it. Here is our finished musket ball. Let's actually kind of looks like a little bit like a piece of modern art there. But let's see if we can cut that sprue off. Break that bit off. We made a musket ball with a jester hat. Take our sprue cutter and just get in there. Trim off those pieces. This is just a pair of wire cutters, really. Pop that off, and there we go. One complete, smooth, round, 75 caliber, or 3/4 of an inch musket ball. That was your standard military round for the British. French tended to use a 6.9 caliber, a little bit smaller. That is a big piece of kinetic energy coming through the air at you. There we are. Cool, right? Mix it up with my original artifacts. Great. One's shiny and one's not. Let's check. One last check on the chat here. Very cool and very shiny. Yeah, I think it's cool. Yeah, downtime is a thing, right? This is your downtime. This is your time to mend clothes, make ammunition, make rounds, and art, too. You often find carved musket balls, people just sitting around the campfire with a knife, whittling little carvings out of a piece of lead. Yeah. How hot up here? We got into the low 90s yesterday. Today wasn't quite that bad, but it's just been a quick change from 50s to 90s overnight. Yeah. I was going to share the strangest thing you heard at a reenactment. Guy was trying to clean a musket when I heard him say, "I can't get my something off. It's starred out." Can you, Kitty, can you code us that word in some way? Were revolvers ever used much in piracy? No. Well, unless you count modern pirates. 1835, yeah, no, you're pretty much wrapped up with any proper piracy by then. Multi-shot weapons existed in the 18th century, usually with breech-loading things where you'd replace the entire breech. They were wonky. They didn't work well. You're pretty much relegated to a single-shot muzzle-loading weapon.
right up until, like you say, the later part of the 19th century. And even then, they were kind of dodgy. They didn't issue them to regular troops. They would be for officers, cavalry maybe, because it's just a pain in the neck to load. You get 5 shots, sure, but then the weapon is almost useless in combat because you have to do some disassembly often to reload it. You're still using pretty much this same loading procedure, just with a revolver. All the cylinders get loaded with powder and ball and wadding, and a percussion cap on the back. So it's your last ditch weapon. You get those 5 or 6 shots, and that's pretty much it. Whereas the muzzle loader, I can continue loading and firing with. So it has its pluses and its drawbacks. Be nice to have a revolver on your hip if you need it, but it's not your primary battle weapon. Why is it blinking out such an innocent word? I have no idea. The thing the cap goes on, he had over-tightened it. It's because the word is nipple. Yeah, and boy, that could get you in trouble because you often have to replace those. They unscrew. Yeah, you must be in a Civil War reenactment at that point to be having percussion caps and nipples. Your gun has nipples. On that note, thanks for joining me at the fire tonight. I think we're going to wrap it there. We made everything we wanted. We got some firing in, which is always fun. If you have questions I didn't cover tonight, feel free to toss them in the Discord. I'll put some pictures up in there as well, some instructions. I have some original 18th century instructions for some of this stuff. And what else was I going to put? A shot tower. Put a picture of a cool shot tower from an original illustration up there as well. So pop over to the Discord. We'll continue what we've been talking about. And I'm going to clean up my mess of lead and sit by the campfire a bit. Thanks, everybody. See you later.